You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one-on-one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1131. Happy Thanksgiving! Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and I am so excited that you are hanging out with me today. Today, we are giving you behind the scenes in regards to our membership communities. And so a lot of our consultants are doing teachings every single week. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have live teachings going on in our membership. So we wanted to give you a little behind the scenes. So we're going to be hearing from Nicole Ball, talking about what to do when referrals are slow, HR basics with Andrew, client retention with Ashley, scaling with Nicole Ball, choosing the right project management systems, and all sorts of other things over the coming weeks. I can't wait to dig into this with you. If you want help from one of our consultants, please head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/apply. I'll chat with you for 30 minutes to determine if one of our membership communities or consulting might be right for you. Now let's get started with this episode.
All right, everybody. So thank you all for being here today. I love this topic, maximizing your end of year goals and your strategies for end of year. The reason I absolutely love this topic is simply because this kind of goes back to what we encourage from our clients, right? We encourage our clients all the time to follow through with review of their assets and resources, with development of goals and objectives, finding things that are measurable, finding ways to be accountable for your own measurements and the own goals that you're setting. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, because I think it's so easy, and I know this from experience as a practice owner, to get caught up in the day-to-day, right? You're kind of in survival mode when you're a practice owner, answering emails, putting out fires, dealing with clinicians, dealing with clients. I spent half a day yesterday just trying to, get some supplies into one of the offices because I forgot my key, and it was a whole thing. Point being is you get so caught up in the day-to-day of running a practice that the thought of like sitting down and doing any kind of strategic planning is really just daunting, and it sounds kind of exhausting, and I'm just trying to get through the day. But I will tell you that the opportunity for growth is always there. It's just, are you going to maximize your potential and your practice's potential to meet those goals? I've said it before. If you want to have $1 million practice, you can have $1 million practice. It'll always be there, right? It's maximizing your own potential and maximizing your own practice's potential by doing some goal setting. And so that's really the main topic of today, is going to be maximizing that potential for yourself. I don't have a PowerPoint today, but what I do have is a nice little overview that I'm going to put in the chat box a little bit towards the end, so you can copy and paste it if you'd like. It's just a little outline of everything that I'm going to be talking about today. But you're going to notice that I have like three kind of main things that we're going to be going over today. Number one is review. And so I'm going to talk about reviewing where you're at and evaluating where you're at. Number two, the very specifics of strategic planning. So a lot of what we do with our clients, just from a more macro perspective, goal setting, what's measurable, what's achievable, long and short-term objectives. And then finally, marketing. I'm going to always talk about marketing because it's that important. And as we come into the end of year, it's important to really identify how we can maximize our growth with our plan for the upcoming year as well. Now, something you heard me talk about last week, if you were with us last week, as I mentioned, I love doing this kind of work right now, this time of year. September, October is my jam for goal setting, for reviewing where I've come from. And I think a lot of people wait until the beginning of the year for that. January is when they're going to get their life together or lose the weight or clean up their closet or their, strategic closet, however you want to say it. They're going to clean things up. But I will tell you that if you wait until January, there's too much going on. It's a bad time of year to do planning. It's a bad time of year to review. I love the fall because for those of us where the leaves change, the leaves are changing. Our kids are going back to school. Our client schedule's changing. Our schedule's changing. We're finding more of a routine. And it puts me in a place where I feel like I can really do some true evaluation. And that's where we need to start. So 3 topics: review, strategic planning, and marketing plans. So number 1 with review. We've got to start somewhere, and we can only know where we're going if we know where we've been, correct? So this is a great time of year to review. So number 1, look at your numbers. Look at your numbers and identify exactly how much money you made this year so far compared to last year so far. Review how many, if you'd like to call them, services or clients you've seen or services provided last year compared to this year. Look at just overall your practice health in terms of last year to this year. And this is going to give us a good shooting off point. The deal here is, though, is that everybody has different metrics of measure. So this could be client volume. This could be number of services provided. This could be revenue. And then for some of you who track these things, depending on, what your practice looks like, it could be client satisfaction. Let's pause and take a look at all of these metrics, client volume, services, revenue, and identify where you were last year, where you are this year. Because again, we want to see that number going up. And the only way we're going to be able to set strategic goals for the following year is to know where we're at, obviously. So you have to know where you're at. And this takes time. And this is the part for some of us that isn't the fun, creative side of strategic planning. This is the, okay, I got to get a spreadsheet. I've got to write some things down. I got to dig in. I got to look at my accounts. I've got to find some charts, whatever it might be. But we want to have a good idea of where we're at. A great way to do this, and I think you probably all know what this is, but the macro side of me loves a good fashioned SWOT analysis. So if you don't know what a SWOT analysis is, SWOT, this is where in 4 quadrants you identify your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, whether they're opportunities that you take advantage of or missed opportunities, and then threats. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I was camping last week. For those of you who are with me, you know that. And I did a SWOT analysis on my life. I know. It was fun and telling, but what that did is it gave me an opportunity to have more very specific measurable goals for myself and for my business, because I had a really clear picture, a very intentional picture of my strengths, weaknesses, my opportunities, and my threats. So this is all part of that review phase that is very, very important as we're maximizing our year-end goals and identifying what we want the following year to be like. So I really, really recommend that you create very intentional space for review. Your client satisfaction, your numbers, your volume, how many clinicians you have, how many services rendered, your client retention, how many clients are coming in for that intake and they're staying, how many calls, how many times are people calling to schedule and they actually schedule, how many times are folks calling to inquire about your services and they follow up with scheduling. So how are you tracking this? And then what do those numbers look like? It's really important to have a good idea of what these numbers are, again, because we need to know where we're going. The only way we can move into strategic planning is if we know where we've been. Something else that I also really like to review when I do this time of year is what's working and what isn't for me when it comes to practice management. So I look at my billing structures. I look at my intake coordinator. I look at the language that she's using. I look at the flow of how things go. I look at what my role is and my responsibility is opposed to what other people's role and responsibility is. This is a beautiful opportunity this time of year to sit back and say, how have things been going and how could they be more smooth? So usually when I do this, I sit down with my intake coordinator and I say, what's been going really well and what needs improvement? And this could be personally from her in her role, but this could also just be in our policies and our procedures and the general management of how we do things. I do the same thing with my billing person. I sit down and say, what's going really well and what isn't? I had this meeting with her last week, and her, isn't is she gets stuck with clients who don't want to pay. And we all know this game. We have a whole nother, webinar on this. But I get stuck with these people who are just refusing to pay. And something we've always avoided at my practice is going through a collection agency. Well, we're at that point where we might need to do that because my poor billing person is just getting so overwhelmed with some of this. So, but if I wouldn't have had that conversation with her and opened that intentional space up for that, that wouldn't be part of our strategic plan, and now it is. So having conversations with your clinicians, with your intake people, with your billing folks, and finding out from a practice management perspective what really is working and what isn't working. So review has to be number one. If you've been with me before, and I think most of you have, you know that before I move on to, each section of my webinars, I do like to pause and just get feedback. So when it comes to the topic of reviewing, so looking at where you've been, what's working, what isn't working, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are missed opportunities? Does anybody have any comments? Does anybody have any advice? Does anybody have any feedback they'd like to offer the group or questions that you have for me?
I just like what Nicole was saying in the beginning, where that we get so caught up on everyday tasks that we forget to review our numbers and assess. I try to put it on my schedule, like every payroll date, I'll go over my numbers to make sure that, I am being diligent about knowing where I am and where I need to be. But I do schedule almost like if an appointment in my calendar so I can not miss that time.
So she basically said that she schedules out time specifically to review these things because she realizes that we often get caught up in the day-to-day task of being business owner and we often forget. And Barbara, you said you put it on your calendar like around payroll time, right?
Yeah, it's just kind of since I'm already looking at the numbers anyways, I'm already looking reports anyways, just seems like to be the easiest and less time consuming.
I think it's important what you said of focusing on where we've been. Not I guess I just don't really think about it. I just know where I want to go. And I think I do have a lot of shame of I'm not doing everything that I need to right now, but also where was I a year ago? I didn't have anybody hired on. I just started through practice launch and, we've increased our income significantly every single month since we've hired on people. And so hey, it's not so bad, and just thinking of yes, there's more I need to do. But also look where we've come to and look where we have our strengths. So I like that. And I don't always look back and see the growth. I'm okay, let's keep going. Let's keep trucking here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That is,
and that's why.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add that's such a good point because we say that to clients all the time, and I don't do that at all with the practice. It's there's so much more I need to be doing and should be doing and want to tackle. And you're right. The word shame is key. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm not the only one.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we just get caught up in the day to day. I call it putting out fires. I mean, I had a plan for today and it did not go the way I wanted it to because I've had one email after another with just a fire that I have to put out. And I think that that's just unfortunately the way it is when we're in a position like this. So yeah, that's definitely a piece of this puzzle is creating the space because nobody's going to create it for you. right? Nobody's just going to hand over to you this time where you can sit down and review how great you've done in areas you need to work and da, 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 da. Nobody's going to do that for you. So you have to be really intentional with it. And I think I love the idea of scheduling it out. I think that's a great idea. Okay, so once you have provided yourself some level of review, once you know where you've been, then you can say, okay, these are the areas that I need to improve on. And that's when we get into the strategic planning. Now, strategic planning from a macro business perspective is almost the exact same kind of planning we do with clients, right? The client has their goal, and then they have their objectives, and then they have their action steps, which are action-oriented, and they're measurable, right? The client will ... by this date. The client will do this within this period. Very rarely do we do that for ourselves, and strategic planning from a business and macro perspective is the exact same thing. So once you know where you've been, you can start breaking down your goals into something that is measurable and action-oriented for yourself. Now, I encourage you to look at short-term goals and long-term. One thing that happens is, at least when I've worked with groups of practice owners before, we get these great big ideas after we do our review, and we get these numbers that we want to see, and we have these, really beautiful ideas that we are going to follow through with. And something that we typically don't do is, or something that we typically do is we make these goals and objectives that are just too big. They're just unmanageable. They're unreasonable. We're not going to be able to pull it off. And we're essentially setting ourselves up for failure, just like we do our clients when our treatment plan is this big, right? When you give a client a treatment plan that's this big, their likelihood for failure is going to be very high. But if we give our clients small, measurable goals that they can be held accountable for, they're more likely to be successful. There's beauty in baby steps. So what I encourage for you to do, and I spent all last week while I was camping doing it, create very measurable and specific goals for yourself. Go back to the good old-fashioned SMART goals that we learned in grad school, right? I mean, the SMART goals are there for a reason. So making sure that they're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, they're time-bound, and create a treatment plan for yourself. Pretend that you are a client and create a treatment plan that is for you specifically, broken down into short-term and long-term. Now, one of the reasons I love short-term versus long-term is there's some big things that we want to achieve, and they're going to happen down the road, but they're not going to happen down the road until we start making those little changes that we need to make, until we start making those little things happen. So we really need to be able to focus in and hone in on those both short-term and long-term goals, because there's things that you can do tomorrow, right? There's things that you can start next week. There's things that you can accomplish by the end of the month, but there's also things that you're not going to probably move into until next year. An example is I'm raising my rates at the beginning of January. I've decided this for lots of different reasons. I've went 2 years without a rate increase. It's time to do it. And this doesn't just happen with the snap of a finger, right? I have to ease my clinicians into it. I have to ease my clients into it. I have to change my systems. I have to change the management. I have to change the language and all of our paperwork. I have to change a lot of things. And so it's not just about, I'm going to change my rates. It's no, on January 1st, I'm going to change my rates. But what this is going to mean is that leading up to January 1st, I need to do some very specific things that are going to help it be a very smooth transition for myself, my administrative people, my clinicians, and my clients. So long-term goals and short-term goals, whatever that means to you. The other thing that I think is really important when we're doing goal setting and we're in that strategic planning is really identifying how we can enhance our services. And this is going to mean something different for everybody, because enhancing services could be policies, they could be protocol, They could be a lot of different things, but they might also be simple things like getting hot cocoa in the lobby instead of just coffee, right? Like, I know that's something little, but if we're talking about how can we enhance the experience of our clients, there's lots of different ways that we can do it. And it doesn't have to be, one specific thing. It could be lots of little smaller things. So how can you change and enhance your lobby, your atmosphere? How can you change and enhance the messages that clients are getting, the automatic messages through your EHR? How can you change the language that your billing people are using or that your intake person is using? How can you better train and prepare your clinicians who are on your team? How can you make things go more smoothly and enhance the experience for both your clients and your clinicians? So that's another thing to consider when you're starting that strategic planning, is it always doesn't have to be about the numbers. It could be just about how do you enhance the experience so that everybody's getting the best out of it. Let's see. Another thing that I think is really important, and this is, this might seem obvious, but what are your profit margins this year and what do you want them to be next year? I shoot for a 20% growth every year. That's my goal every year. Most of the time I get to it. But if I don't have that growth mindset, I'm not going to push any harder. Why would I push harder, if I don't want growth? But if you want growth and you have the opportunity to envision what that growth looks like by seeing the numbers on a spreadsheet, seeing the numbers on paper, writing them down in a notebook, I think you're much more likely to reach those goals and work hard for those goals. So I want you to look at your profit margins, but look at where you would like to be. Most of you at this point, you're growing and you're going to continue to grow. But I think that when it comes to strategic planning, something that will hold you accountable is a number. And I had somebody once tell me, don't look at the numbers. Kind of like when you're trying to lose weight, right? Don't look at the scale, focus on how you feel and, how well you're sleeping and all that. But when it comes to business, I know that numbers are measurable for me because numbers mean that my lifestyle gets to change. Maybe this means I get to go on another vacation with my family. Maybe this means I get to travel somewhere I've never been before. Maybe this means I can work 3 days a week instead of working 4 days a week. Maybe this means I can pay off my house early and be debt free. Maybe this means I can help my family. So when you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at what you want that profit margin to look like and what you want those numbers to be for next year, don't just say, I want to increase my revenue by 20%, because that's great. But what does that 20% mean to you? Make it more, what's the word I'm looking for? Give yourself the opportunity to visualize what that 20% is and what it means. Because it's really easy to say, throw a number out there. But what does that number mean to you? And when you make it mean something to you, just like we do with motivational interviewing with our clients, right? We give them the opportunity to envision what that change will look like. I encourage you to do the same thing. So it's okay to throw a number out there, but what does that number mean to you? For me, my goal for next year is to have all of my credit card debt paid off. And I've got a lot of it because I made a bunch of mistakes in my younger years that I'm still playing catch up from. But my goal is for my husband and I to be 100% debt free, to have everything paid off except for the house by next year. And I can do that if I can increase my revenue by a certain percentage and if I follow the plan that I created in order to do that. Now, if I just said, okay, I want to increase by 20%, that's great. But what does that 20% mean to me? And for me, that means I'm going to go on 2 big vacations next year instead of 1 with my family. And I'm going to have all my credit card debt paid off. And then I can envision myself this time next year when all of my credit card debt is paid, when I'm just coming home from my second big vacation with my family, and I'm starting to plan what the next year is going to look like.
Do you often find yourself overwhelmed by the influx of client calls you receive? Receptionists are expensive. but you can't afford to let your patients go to voicemail. You care for your clients, so you try to phone them back, but more often than not, it's too late. They've gone to another practice. When you partner with Well Received, you capture every opportunity. Your calls are answered by professional medical receptionists 24/7, and they can support you with more than just message taking. They offer new patient intake, after-hours service, bilingual services, medical appointment scheduling, medical live chat, and so much more. All this at a fraction of the cost of an in-house receptionist. Your patients are Well Received's priority. As a Practice of the Practice listener, you can get an exclusive 50% off your first 2 months of service. Head on over to wellreceived.com/Joe to start growing your practice today.
I know it sounds cheesy, but give yourself the opportunity to dream and give yourself the opportunity to imagine the life that you know that you can have. Because I said it last week, we're in here to help people. We love therapy. We love counseling. We love providing mental health services. But at the end of the day, you're a practice owner because you know you can make more money and you know that you can have the opportunity to live the life that you want to live. So that's my little plug to all of you, to not be ashamed of or shameful of talking about money and setting money goals for yourself. Okay? Don't be afraid to do it. So number 1, review. Number 2, strategic planning. My challenge to all of you is going to be to spend time this next week getting a plan together for how you're going to do this, how you are going to review where you've been, so you know where you want to move into strategic planning. And once you've done that, my challenge will be to make a treatment plan for yourself. What are the short and long-term goals? What are the objectives? And then what are the very measurable action steps that are action-oriented that you're going to take in order to meet those goals? And it could be small, but it could also be really, really big. But if you don't give yourself the opportunity to do it, nobody else is going to do it for you. All right. So before I move on to my last point, does anybody have anything that they would like to add or share or speak on, or questions they have about the strategic planning side of preparing yourself for the upcoming end of year?
So I got this from Ashley Mielke talked about this book. It's actually like a planner, but it's all about goal setting. So each month you set your goals and like what's working. And then at the end of the month, you reflect back on like what didn't work. And then it also has you plan out like, okay, 3 months from now, like, what do you want to accomplish? Like 6 months from now. So like working through it, I was like, oh, like these are my goals. Like these are the things that I'm wanting to do. So it was a really good thing to help me strategize. But I do think I do need to be more specific on, like you were talking about, with like, what is my exact number that I want to achieve?
Is that a journal, Christina?
Well, and also, Christina, what does that number mean to you and to your family and to your future? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's a journal / planner.
Okay.
Christina, I already did a Google search and it's not coming up really fast. Who's it by? Oh, I can't hear what you're saying.
Kristen Edmiston. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for putting that in the chat. Yeah, I love all that. And we encourage our clients to do all this homework, right? Don't we say that to our clients? We say, most of the work is done outside of session, but then what do? Right? Most of our work is done while we're putting fires out, and we're not spending time outside of session being intentional about our goal setting. And whether that's personal or professional, that doesn't matter. But why aren't we doing the same thing we tell our clients to do? So yeah, I love that stuff. Does anybody else have anything they want to share or add, or questions they have?
I do. I love your approach, because this is why we're here. This idea of don't be afraid or ashamed about looking at this from a financial standpoint and like what your goals are in that arena. And I love even because I have a college student and another one a senior, so I have another tuition on my horizon, and so that's my practical. Okay, we're paying for one tuition, we want to be able to pay for the other one too. And it really does make it practical. Like, so when I'm looking at percentages, I'm also like knowing how much those tuition payments are going to be costing me. And so it really is very just helpful and motivating rather than just this nebulous number that's floating out there. So I don't know. I'm resonating with everything you're sharing today. It's helpful.
Thanks for sharing, Michelle. Yeah, I know that for me, I'm a visual person, and I need to be able to imagine what I'm going to get out of this and what this is going to be like for me. If I'm putting in all this hard work, yeah, my bills are paid and that's great. But you know what? I could get my bills paid going and working for CMH, right? I could go and get my bills paid working for a nonprofit. But most of us have put our time in those arenas, and we've moved on to this in an effort to have a bigger and better life for our family and have more financial freedom and have more time with our families and work less, you know? And I don't want there to be shame around the money aspect, because I think we're unfortunately trained that way. We're trained that we're serving our communities and it's all about service. And don't get me wrong, it is, but you're a business owner for a reason. Any of us could go get a job, but we're doing this because we have higher hopes for ourselves and financially for our families. And so, yeah, don't be ashamed of that. And that's awesome that you're paying for tuition. I mean, it's a lot, but it's really great that you're doing that. Anybody else?
No, I just want to add, I agree. Like, it's so nice to hear somebody else in our field kind of say there's no shame around wanting to make more money, because it does feel like it's hard to get that out of our DNA in a sense of, we're here to help. And, I have a close friend who has a law practice, and it's just like, that also provides a service to their clients, but there's no shame in earning money from it. And it's like so deeply rooted somehow. So I always appreciate hearing it.
Thank you. Yeah. It's taken me a while to get there too. I would say the last 5 years, I've really started to move into that arena of I built this and it was a lot of hard work, and the fruits of our labor, we should be proud of them. So, okay. My last little thing here is marketing. Now, there's a ton of webinars on marketing and practice of the practice that you can go look at. I've talked about marketing with your individual consultations. You've probably talked about marketing. We talk about it all the time, but the reason I have it separate from the strategic plan is because I think there's always room to go outside of our comfort zone a little bit. And marketing is one of those areas that we stay in the comfy spot, but we're never going to get more clients if we don't crawl out of that comfy spot and try new things. So something that I do every year, and I don't really say out loud that I'm doing it, but it's just something that I've done every year around this time of year, is identify one new thing that I'm going to do for marketing, and I'll see if it works. I've shared with you all that I don't like going to those networking events. You've heard me talk about before how it didn't really get me any clients. And so why would I invest my time? It's nice to network. It's nice to shake hands, meet other professionals. That sense of fellowship and community is really cool. But I, as a full-time college professor and a mom and a practice owner, I don't have time to go to these networking events all the time. And frankly, they weren't getting me more clients. So why would I spend time doing that? So when October came around, September, October, and I'm starting to review what I did last year, that one new thing I tried, I said, you know what? Networking events don't work for me. I'm not going to do it anymore. But I tried it, right? There was one year that I decided, and you've heard me talk about this before if you've been with me long enough, meeting with folks for coffee and finding direct referral resources that way. That really has worked for me. I've gotten a ton of referrals by having individual sit-down talking relationships with people. And so when my year came around, I said, you know what? I tried it and I'm going to keep doing it. And I still do it to this day. There was one year that I said, you know what? I'm going to try the commercial TV ad thing and see how that goes. I tried it. It didn't work at all. I didn't get any referrals from a magazine ad I did or a radio ad. Maybe I've gotten one. I don't know. They're hard to track, but I didn't get any. So, but if I wouldn't have stuck my neck out and tried something different in the marketing world, I wouldn't have figured out what works for me and what doesn't. Because what works for me in my geographical area of northern Michigan is going to be very different of what works for you in geographically where you are, the insurances you accept, your the kind of clinicians you have, the setup you have. Something's going to work different for everybody. Just because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So with that being said, my third thing is marketing, and my challenge to you is around this time of year is a great time to say, okay, what am I going to do different? What am I going to try and see if it works for me? Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But if you don't try, you won't know. So some ideas. This could be social media. We've always done Facebook. We're adding Instagram this year. Actually, I lie. We've had an Instagram. It's just been very inactive, and I've done nothing with it for the past 3 years. But what I'm going to do this year is I'm really going to beef up our Instagram and really make that more engaging, get more followers, because a lot of the younger folks that we're meeting, they don't have Facebook anymore. Facebook isn't cool anymore, right? So that's something that we're going to do different this year, or I'm going to try this year. But it could be social media. It could be newspaper ads or magazine ads. It could be trying something different with your SEO. It could be the coffee chats that I've talked about. It could be the networking events. It could be the health expos. That's another thing that I'm doing this year that I took a couple of years off from doing is health expos. I'm going to do a few of those this year and see how those go. The last time I did a health expo, I don't think we got any clients from it, but I got 2 clinicians from it. So keep that in mind too. You're not always seeking out clients. Sometimes you get clinicians from some of these things. Other ideas, community organizations, community charities and events, young professional events. What else? Blogging. Blogging is kind of like a thing of the past, but it's not. It's all about clicking. It's all about the clicks that you get to get people to your website, and blogging gets clicks, especially when they're short and sweet and cute. A practice owner I used to work with is now on TikTok. I'm not ready to go in that direction, but I think that's great. If she has the time and the energy to be out there and creating that kind of media content, I think that's awesome, especially if it gets her more clients. Because that's what we're about, right? We're about getting the numbers and getting the clients. So if that gets her more clients, awesome. So my point is I want you, as you're in your strategic planning mode, I want you to start to think about the opportunities that are in front of you and the opportunities that you have taken advantage of and evaluate how they've done. And then maybe some of the opportunities that you've never thought of, or the opportunities that, you've said, oh, I don't want to do that. Maybe they cost money. Maybe they're going to take up your time. But I would challenge all of you to identify at least one marketing strategy that you've always stepped back from and maybe dip your toes in and see how it goes. So just some ideas there. But that's why I have marketing kind of separate from strategic planning, just because I think it's important to, identify what's going to work for us and what isn't from that bigger perspective. So before I wrap this up with a review, anybody have any comments on marketing and the idea of maybe trying something new this year and the challenge to try something new?
I was in a program once, and when they were talking about marketing, they mentioned to try not to have more than 5 marketing things going on at once, because then we get too bogged down and spread out. And also not to do things that you don't enjoy, because they tend to not work because we're not going to put time into them. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Obviously doing things that you don't enjoy, I think, is a big reason that I stopped doing the networking events outside of just not getting clients from them. I found that when I was going to those networking events, you get the free food, there's a guest speaker, you chit chat with the people at your table, you walk around, maybe shake a few hands, but there's no meaning in it. It's not a meaningful relationship. What's important to me is building relationships with people, which is why I kind of started those coffee chat things you've heard me talk about in the past, where I meet individuals for coffee. And I learn about their practices and their services. And then in turn, they get to learn about mine. And then we build that referral relationship. I enjoy that. I enjoy sitting down and learning intimately about what people are doing in our community and how we can share resources, how we can collaborate. I really love that. So I love that point of not doing things that are of interest to you, which is why I'm not doing the whole TikTok thing. I'm not hopping on that bandwagon because I don't want to be in front of the camera. And the thought of like coming up with content every day just sounds exhausting. Like, I can't do that. I'm not that creative, nor do I want to put myself out there. But I also think the idea of no more than 3 or 5 things, I think that's great, but you have to first find out what works for you and what doesn't, which is the point of what I'm saying today. If you don't stick your neck out there, stick your toes in, however you want to say it, and try new things, you're not going to know what works for you or not. And then once you know what works for you, then sure, sticking 3 to 5 things, I think is a great idea because, again, you want what's going to bring in clients, not what's going to look good or sound good or smell good. You want things that are going to bring you clients and bring you money. So hopefully that answered your question. Anybody else have any comments or questions on that about trying new things in the marketing world?
Can you hear me, Nicole?
I still can't hear you, Barbara. I'm sorry. Maybe other people can though. So Brent, you can be the official
Barbara, I'll translate for you.
Thank you so much.
Interpreter.
On the same topic that Nicole was saying that, she doesn't wanted to do, those TikToks and be on videos or meetings. Like, I feel so behind because I don't want to have a TikTok account and I don't want to put myself out there on videos and reels and all that. So, I mean, I don't know. I feel behind for not doing what everybody else is doing. And I feel like I could do better. So that's why I struggle with the idea of, everybody else is doing and they can get so much more. So, but I prefer not to do it. I don't know. I don't even know if it is a question, but it's just a comment, I guess.
So she said that she's similar to you. She does not do the TikToks or videos and things like that, but it's causing her to feel behind compared to other practices because she just doesn't like being on camera and doing those types of things.
Yeah, I don't either. It's this vulnerability that, like, maybe in my younger years I would have enjoyed, but in my 40s I'm just kind of over it. Like, I don't want to mess with it. But with that being said, you can always find people to do that for you if it is an interest of yours. But again, I'm always going to go to what is going to get me clients. I want to do what's going to get me clients. All right, friends. So we have review and strategic planning, which includes marketing. I want to challenge all of you to create very intentional space for this. Because again, this is something we encourage our clients to do, but then we don't do ourselves. And I think if we create very intentional, and I'm going to keep saying that word because it has to be intentional. If we create very intentional space to sit down, grab a notebook, and just start writing down ideas and brainstorming and chicken scratch and, come up with some ideas, I think it's going to lend itself to growth simply because you're giving yourself time and space for the purpose of growth, right? So again, we're putting fires out all day, but when we sit down and we say, okay, cool, what's worked and what hasn't? Okay, cool, what are my strengths and my weaknesses? All right, what are some of my opportunities that I'm not taking advantage of? How are my practice management procedures and policies really working? How happy are my clinicians, right? If we start asking those questions, we're going to get answers that are going to lead us to opportunities to have very measurable and specific goals for ourselves, both short and long term. So that's what I kind of want to leave you with today. I am going to really quickly paste in the comments just a quick little outline of everything I've talked about today. So nothing too fancy, just my little thoughts on, the idea of review and strategic planning and marketing. If you've never done a SWOT analysis, I really encourage you to Google it and there's some cool templates you can find for it. SWOT analysis is something I teach in all of my macro classes at the university for business and for nonprofits and for just some of those community practices. But what I've started doing is in some of my master's level individual clinical work classes, I have folks do SWOT analysis on on themselves and their interviewing skills. And that's been really fun too. So SWOT analysis are really good for lots of different things, but it's really just an opportunity for review for you to see where you're at and what opportunities you might have. So as always, thank you all for being here. I always like to end about 10 minutes early just to give you all some time to ask questions if you like. I'm going to stick around for another 10 minutes for anybody who has questions or wants to discuss anything. But otherwise, thank you all for being here. Sorry about the little bit of technical difficulties, especially to you, Barbara. It was great seeing you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for listening to the Practice of the Practice podcast today. These trainings are available in our membership communities. Now, we're going to be opening up our membership communities more than just when we're opening Level Up Week. So if there's one that you are interested in, I would love for you to head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership, where there's more details and you can get notifications when those open up. So if you are in solo practice, just getting going, if you are building and sustaining a sustainable solo practice, Next Level Practice is for you. If you are looking to launch a group practice launch is for you, and Group Practice Boss is for all those group practice bosses out there. We are here helping you build a thriving practice that you absolutely love every single day, and we couldn't do that without our sponsors. And our sponsor for today's episode is Well Received. Oftentimes, people are calling through all the phone numbers, and if someone answers the phone, those are the clients that actually get in. If you want help getting every single phone call answered 24/7, you need the support of Well Received. They do new client intakes, after-hours services, bilingual support, and so much more. You can get 50% off your first 3 months over at wellreceived.com/Joe to start growing your practice today. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.